In 2008, the nation was teetering on the brink of a disastrous financial meltdown. It became a test for President Bush's Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson. He spearheaded a massive rescue to avoid a second Great Depression. The $700 billion bailout was seen as a landmark moment for the economy. Today, he is sounding the alarm about problems he says are even more pressing. Jan Crawford recently talked with Paulson. She is in Washington. Jan, good morning.
Well, good morning. So, Charlie, Paulson is a man who is just in constant motion. But when he returned to private life after the financial crisis, he says he suddenly just came to a stop and he struggled. He says he lost his joy, his sense of purpose. But today he has found a new mission and he's devoting his considerable time, energy, and money into finding solutions.
This is McCormick Bird Sanctuary.
If you ran into this unassuming couple on one of their nature walks,
See that, Hank?
Yep.
you'd never know the power this man once held.
The Dow tumbled more than 500 points.
This is going to be one of the watershed days in financial markets history.
As Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson bailed out the banks and guided the nation out of financial crisis.
The American people can remain confident.
His influence so great, he was called King Henry.
Fox Sparrow right there. Yeah.
This is Paulson today, a lifelong conservationist birdwatching with his wife, Wendy, and sounding the alarm on two issues he says are even more critical than the financial crisis: our relationship with China and the environment.
As bad as it was with the financial crisis, the United States government was able to come in at pretty much the last minute when there was a crisis and take steps that avoided the worst outcomes. When you look at the climate change crisis, it's cumulative.
This is more as dire as the financial crisis.
It is more dire because it threatens to change the way of life as we know it on our planet.
Key to solving the problem is China, where Paulson has more than 25 years of experience, going back to his days as CEO of Goldman Sachs.
Let me get up here.
Through his work at the Paulson Institute, which he calls a think and do tank, and in his new book, Dealing with China, he urges the U.S. to engage and cooperate with the communist superpower.
Stop and think a minute. Almost any major global problem, whether we're talking about the environment and climate change, whether we're talking about minimizing terrorism or nuclear proliferation, all of these will be easier to solve if we're working with China and more difficult if we're working at cross purposes of China.
He points out that China will soon have the world's leading economy, knocking the U.S. off the top spot for the first time in a century. And with 1.4 billion people and more than half of the new buildings in the world going up in its cities, China also edges out the U.S. in the production of greenhouse gases.
If they're not successful in dealing with their environmental problems and dealing with climate change, it's going to hurt us all.
The world will feel the impact.
The world will feel the impact. And I'll tell you, if they can't grow their economy, and if their economy would fail, every single one of our economic problems, in my judgment, would be more difficult to meet. So for all of those who are rooting against China to fail, be careful what you wish for. Hey, how are you doing?
Pretty good.
He is a man fully engaged. But in his book, Paulson reveals after returning to private life in the aftermath of the financial crisis, he lost his sense of joy and purpose.
I knew when I'd asked for and got extraordinary powers and used them in very novel ways, there was almost certain to be criticism. And it's one thing to understand that intellectually. It's another thing to emotionally live it.
Paulson says he eventually came to terms with the criticism. What brought him back was his grandchildren.
A little granddaughter calling up in your lap and saying, "Papa, your hair, you don't have any hair, it's melted."
You have to smile, man.
We set up the Institute.
Today, at 69 years old, he says he's found his purpose.
I want my children and my grandchildren to grow up in a safe world. I want them to grow up in a world that is prosperous, that's got a clean environment, and I think that's going to be much more difficult to do if we're at odds with China or if we're in conflict with China.
Right there.
I'm an optimist that we can make it work.
It's Fox Sparrow.
Now, he and his wife, Wendy, are putting their money behind that mission. They're reportedly worth about $800 million, and they told me that they plan to give away most of their estate to charity to support conservation. And their 2 kids are fully on board. Gail?
Yeah, they're filming it.
Jan, what a great story.
I
Yeah, it
think
really
so
was.
too, Jan.
And he is so right.
He is so
Yes.
right. I mean, this is what we tried to get to a little bit with our profile of Caroline Kennedy, who's the
Yes.
new ambassador to Japan, is that the U.S. is trying to get everybody to start thinking more about Asia. The rise of China is so
Yes.
incredibly important. They're going to surpass the U.S. as the economic superpower, quadrupling their military budget. We have to keep our eye on that.
And because of the pollution there, too.
Absolutely.
It's a huge global issue.
Very smart guy, puts things in perspective, even if his hair is melting, as his granddaughter said. That was a very sweet moment.
What happened to your hair?
Yes, could happen to the best of us. Thank you, Jan, again.